Gabriel sat on the edge of the empty restaurant, his eyes filled with exhaustion as he glanced at Lily, sound asleep beside him. Just hours ago, he had managed to scrape together enough to keep them warm for the night, but now it felt like everything was slipping away. He heard footsteps approaching and knew something was wrong. The doors of the restaurant swung open, and in walked a man from his past. What happened next would not only shatter Gabriel's hopes, but put everything he held dear in jeopardy.
Hi, I'm Emma Blake. Welcome to True Tales, where real-life stories inspire and surprise. Today's story has a twist you won't see coming, so stick around. Let's get started.
Gabriel sat on the edge of the empty restaurant, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He glanced at Lily, peacefully asleep beside him, her small body curled up in a jacket he managed to borrow. The once bustling restaurant, now cold and abandoned, felt like a reflection of his life. Everything was slowly slipping away, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Just hours ago, Gabriel scraped together enough to keep them warm for the night. But as the hours passed, the weight of their situation became clearer. The restaurant, now on the verge of collapse, was his last hope, and even that was fading. He looked out into the dark, unsure of what was to come, but knowing it wasn't good. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching. Gabriel froze, his heart racing. Something was wrong. The tension in the air grew as the sound of footsteps echoed louder and louder. Gabriel quickly stood up, fear tightening in his chest, knowing that whatever was coming wouldn't bring good news. The doors of the restaurant swung open, and in walked a man from Gabriel's past. The figure stood tall, his eyes scanning the room before locking onto Gabriel. Instantly, a pit formed in Gabriel's stomach. This man had been trouble before, and now, standing before him, he looked more dangerous than ever. In that moment, Gabriel knew this wasn't just about losing the restaurant. Everything he held dear, especially Lily, was now at risk. The man's smirk said it all. Whatever came next would shatter Gabriel's last shred of hope and put everything on the line. Gabriel once had it all, a thriving business and a beautiful home. His natural talent for business earned him respect and success, but it also made him overconfident. As his business grew, so did his risks. The flashback shows a younger Gabriel, full of ambition, sealing deals with a confident smile, unaware of the impending downfall. One wrong decision, an investment that seemed foolproof, turned out to be a disaster. The deal went south, and Gabriel was left scrambling to save his business. The stress of financial loss began to wear on him, but he was determined to turn things around. As debts piled up, Gabriel lost everything: his business, his home, and his reputation. The once confident businessman was now reduced to a man struggling to survive. With no place to go, he wandered the streets, holding onto Lily's hand, trying to shield her from the harsh reality of their situation. Now living on the streets, Gabriel's pride took the hardest hit. He was no longer the man he once was, and the guilt of his decisions weighed heavily on him. He would sit for hours watching others go about their lives, feeling like a failure. Despite his struggles, Gabriel remained resilient. His love for Lily kept him going, and he promised himself that he would find a way out, no matter how hopeless things seemed. But for now, they had to face the harsh reality of their new life. As Gabriel and Lily wander through the streets, they spot a small, dimly lit restaurant. The sign is faded, the windows cracked, and the air feels heavy with neglect. Gabriel hesitates, but knows they have no choice. He gently squeezes Lily's hand, giving her a reassuring look. Inside, they are met by Matthew, the weary owner. His blue eyes glance at them with a mix of suspicion and pity. Gabriel pleads with Matthew for a place to stay, just for the night. Matthew sighs deeply, knowing he barely has enough to keep the place open, but nods in agreement. As they enter the restaurant, the emptiness strikes them. The once vibrant space now feels cold and lifeless. Dust covers the tables, and chairs are stacked in a corner. Gabriel senses the weight of Matthew's struggle mirrored in his own. Matthew directs them to a small back room where they can stay for the night. Gabriel is overwhelmed with gratitude, though he can see the exhaustion in Matthew's face. The unspoken understanding between two men on the verge of losing everything lingers in the air. Lily, oblivious to the deeper problems, sits quietly on a chair, looking at the empty tables. Her innocent curiosity contrasts with the somber atmosphere. Gabriel watches her, a small glimmer of hope flickering inside him despite their dire situation. Gabriel, realizing the dire state of the restaurant, offers Matthew some simple ideas, suggesting that they could start by creating small promotions or handing out flyers in the local area. His voice is calm, but there's an undercurrent of urgency as he speaks, knowing that time is running out for both of them. Matthew listens, his brows furrowed, weighing Gabriel's words carefully. He hasn't trusted anyone in a long time, but there's something about Gabriel's sincerity that makes him pause. Reluctantly, he nods, allowing Gabriel to help in whatever way he can. Determined to prove his worth, Gabriel immediately takes action. He grabs a broom and begins cleaning the neglected space, his movements purposeful and swift. The dust, once a forgotten symbol of decline, now swirls in the air as Gabriel works tirelessly to restore order. As Gabriel scrubs the floors and wipes down tables, Matthew watches from a distance, his expression softening. There's a glimmer of hope in the way Gabriel approaches the task, an energy that had long been missing from the restaurant. Lily, too, begins to help in her own way, quietly arranging napkins on the freshly cleaned tables. Gabriel glances at her with a small, encouraging smile, their silent teamwork a testament to their resilience. The tranquility in the restaurant is broken when an old acquaintance of Gabriel suddenly enters. His sharp, dark eyes quickly lock onto Gabriel, a smug smirk curling at the corners of his lips. Without hesitation, the man begins to speak, bringing up Gabriel's past in front of Matthew, his voice dripping with arrogance. Gabriel's face pales slightly, his confident demeanor cracking as the man continues to reveal details about his former life. Details Gabriel had hoped to leave behind. His eyes dart between the man and Matthew, fear flickering in his gaze as the past catches up with him. Matthew stands still, his expression shifting from confusion to doubt. His blue eyes narrow as he listens to the accusations, uncertainty creeping in. He wonders if he has made a grave mistake by trusting Gabriel. Gabriel, now visibly shaken, tries to defend himself, but his voice falters. The conversation escalates into a heated argument, with Gabriel's vulnerability exposed under the relentless barrage of accusations. The man's smugness only deepens, enjoying the control he has over Gabriel in this moment. As the tension rises, Matthew silently steps back, his mind swirling with doubt. Gabriel's desperate attempts to explain seem futile as the seeds of mistrust are firmly planted in Matthew's heart. Matthew's financial situation grows more desperate as the restaurant's bills continue to pile up. Even though Gabriel's efforts have brought in a few more customers, the weight of the accumulated debt is becoming unbearable. The sight of overdue notices scattered across his desk adds to the stress, each one more threatening than the last. Matthew sits at his desk, his face tight with tension as he stares at the mounting bills. The threat of eviction looms heavily over him, and his pale, weary eyes reflect the worry that has settled in. Every unpaid bill is a reminder that time is running out. Gabriel watches from a distance, aware that his small improvements haven't made the impact he had hoped for. His expression is a mix of frustration and concern, knowing that Matthew's problems are getting worse by the day. Matthew's shoulders slump as he reads another eviction notice, the words bold and undeniable. His heart pounds, knowing that the possibility of losing the restaurant and everything he's worked for is becoming all too real. The room feels stifling as Matthew holds his head in his hands, the weight of the financial pressure finally breaking through his resolve. His mind races, but no solutions come, only more doubt and fear. Gabriel watches helplessly as the pressure builds, feeling the weight of his failure to improve their situation. Every day feels like a battle he is slowly losing, and it reflects in his demeanor. His shoulders are tense, his expression hardened, yet beneath it all is a deep vulnerability. He often finds himself staring into the distance, thinking about how to escape this downward spiral, but no solutions come. Lily, once so full of life and laughter, has grown quieter over the past few weeks. Her once bright eyes now look tired, her usual joy replaced by worry. She doesn't understand everything happening, but she senses the tension in the air. Today, she asks Gabriel if things will ever get better, her innocent voice breaking the silence. Gabriel looks at her, trying to hold it together, but the strain is clear. As Gabriel holds her, trying to reassure her, his words feel hollow. He doesn't have the answer she needs, and his mind is racing, trying to figure out how he will take care of her. His hands tremble slightly as he embraces her tightly, not wanting her to feel his fear. The pressure of being her protector weighs heavier with each passing moment. Gabriel knows he's running out of time. Lily's emotional health is deteriorating under the weight of the uncertainty that clouds their lives, and he feels powerless to stop it. He struggles to maintain a brave face, but inside, the doubt and fear are growing stronger. Lily clings to Gabriel, sensing his unease. Her small hand reaches for his, but even she can feel that something isn't right. There is a moment of silence between them as the weight of their uncertain future fills the air, thick and suffocating. Gabriel kneels down to her level, looking into her worried hazel eyes. He tells her things will get better, but his voice wavers slightly, betraying his growing fear. He forces a smile, but even Lily, in her innocence, can see the cracks in his facade. The room feels smaller, the walls closing in as Gabriel watches Lily retreat into herself. The playful child she used to be feels like a distant memory, replaced by someone too young to carry such worry. Gabriel's heart aches as he watches her innocence slip away with every passing day of struggle. As the day turns into night, Gabriel sits in silence, reflecting on how they reached this point. He looks at Lily, who has finally fallen asleep, her small form curled up in bed. The room is still, but Gabriel's mind is anything but. He knows he needs a solution, and fast, but the path forward remains clouded in uncertainty. Gabriel arrives at the restaurant, his mind still swirling from the pressures of home and Lily's struggles. As he steps into the empty dining area, an eerie silence fills the room. The tables are neatly set, but the lack of customers is stark. Gabriel senses something isn't right as he moves toward the back office, where he finds Matthew sitting at his desk, looking more exhausted than ever. Matthew hesitates for a moment before finally confessing the truth. He reaches into a drawer and pulls out a piece of paper, his hand trembling slightly. He hands it to Gabriel, who stares at the eviction notice in disbelief. The restaurant is on the verge of being shut down, and there's nothing they can do to stop it. The realization hits Gabriel like a punch to the gut. As Matthew explains the situation, his voice is strained with regret. The business has been struggling for longer than Gabriel knew, and now it's too late to fix it. Gabriel's mind races, trying to process this devastating news. He looks around the empty restaurant, feeling the weight of their failure pressing down on him. Gabriel asks Matthew why he didn't say anything sooner, his voice filled with frustration and confusion. Matthew, his eyes red with stress, can only offer a weak apology. He had hoped to turn things around, but didn't want to burden Gabriel with the reality of how dire the situation was. Now it's too late, and the restaurant is doomed. The two men stand in the middle of the dining area, the silence between them growing heavier. Gabriel's thoughts drift to Lily and how this failure will affect her. The pressure on his shoulders feels unbearable, and he wonders if they'll ever recover from this setback. As they sit in the empty restaurant, Gabriel's anger fades into a deep sense of hopelessness. He stares at the eviction notice in his hand, the cold reality sinking in. They've lost everything, and it feels like the end of the road. Matthew finally breaks the silence, admitting that he's been hiding the truth for months. His guilt is palpable, but it does little to ease the tension between them. Gabriel feels betrayed, but knows there's no point in arguing now. The damage is done. Gabriel stands up and walks toward the window, looking out at the street. The bustling city outside feels like a different world, detached from the failure inside the restaurant. He takes a deep breath, trying to muster the strength to face what comes next, but the future feels more uncertain than ever. Gabriel, feeling the pressure of their mounting failures, sits down with Matthew to discuss a new approach. His face shows a spark of determination as he lays out a plan for the restaurant's survival. He suggests creating a promotion aimed at the local workers, offering discounts during lunchtime to attract a steady flow of customers. Gabriel's voice is filled with hope, but Matthew remains skeptical. As Gabriel continues, he proposes using social media to create more visibility for the restaurant. He explains how simple posts and engaging with the local community online could bring in more customers. The idea seems promising, but Matthew's expression stays doubtful, his hesitation clear. Gabriel presents a printed flyer he's designed for the promotion, showing it to Matthew. The flyer is simple but catchy, and Gabriel believes it could make a difference. He talks about connecting with nearby businesses, offering discounts to their employees. Matthew listens, but the weariness in his eyes shows he isn't fully convinced. Matthew leans back in his chair, arms crossed, clearly struggling to embrace Gabriel's optimism. He's been through too many disappointments, and his hesitation stems from a deep fear of failure. Despite Gabriel's passion, Matthew isn't sure if another attempt will be enough to turn things around. Gabriel senses Matthew's resistance, but refuses to give up. His voice grows more impassioned as he explains the potential of the plan. He knows they don't have much time, and this might be their last shot. The frustration of not being able to convince Matthew starts to show on Gabriel's face. As the conversation continues, Matthew remains silent, lost in thought. The weight of his responsibility is evident in his slouched posture. His hesitation is not about the plan itself, but the fear of risking what little they have left. Gabriel pauses, waiting for Matthew's response. The silence stretches, and it's clear that Matthew is struggling to find the courage to take one more chance. Gabriel leans forward, his eyes pleading for Matthew to trust him, to believe that there's still hope. After what feels like an eternity, Matthew finally speaks, his voice low and filled with uncertainty. He's willing to consider the plan, but his reservations are still clear. Gabriel feels a flicker of hope, but knows the road ahead will be tough, and this is just the beginning. Gabriel stood alone in the kitchen, his back turned to the bustling restaurant. He could sense the tension building, but for now, he focused on the task at hand, trying to push away the rising doubt creeping into his thoughts. In the distance, voices carried through the air, with one voice growing increasingly louder, Anna's. She had always been a loyal customer and a trusted friend to Matthew, but things were changing. Rumors had started to spread about Gabriel's past, and Anna wasn't sure what to believe anymore. In the dining area, Anna stood with Matthew, her eyes filled with concern. She questioned Gabriel's true intentions, her voice hesitant yet firm. "Are you sure he's the right person to trust, Matthew?" she asked. Matthew looked conflicted, caught between his loyalty to Gabriel and the nagging doubt Anna had planted in his mind. Gabriel, still working in the kitchen, was oblivious to the depth of their conversation, though he could feel the weight of their scrutiny. Anna leaned in closer to Matthew, her posture reflecting her growing unease. "I've heard things about him, about his past. What if he's not who he says he is?" Matthew remained quiet, unsure of how to respond. His trust in Gabriel had been strong, but Anna's words were beginning to cast a shadow of doubt over his judgment. The tension between them grew, with each passing second driving a wedge between their once unshakable confidence in Gabriel. Gabriel noticed the uneasy silence in the room and glanced toward the dining area. He saw Matthew and Anna talking, their faces serious, their body language tense. His heart sank as he realized that their conversation was about him. A sense of isolation swept over him, though he tried to ignore it, focusing on his work instead. But the doubt was there, gnawing at him, making him wonder if everything he had worked for was slipping away. As their conversation ended, Matthew turned back to the kitchen, his face clouded with uncertainty. Anna's words lingered in his mind, and for the first time, he wasn't sure if Gabriel was the ally he had always believed him to be. Gabriel, now fully aware of the growing rift between them, felt the weight of his past pressing down harder than ever before. He knew that if he couldn't prove himself soon, he would lose not just their trust, but the only chance he had left. Gabriel sat alone, his mind racing as he stared down at the counter. In his hand, he held an old photo of Lily, her smiling face looking back at him with the innocence of a child. The weight of everything that had happened was starting to crush him. He wondered if all the struggles, all the sacrifices were worth it. Was he fighting a battle he couldn't win? The restaurant had always been his chance at redemption, a way to start fresh and prove to himself and others that he could do better. But now, with Matthew starting to doubt him and Anna's growing mistrust, the path ahead felt uncertain. For the first time, Gabriel began to seriously consider walking away. Maybe it was time to leave the restaurant behind and accept that not every battle could be won. As he sat there, the silence of the empty kitchen filled the space around him. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound breaking the stillness, a reminder of how time was slipping away. Gabriel closed his eyes, trying to shake off the thoughts of giving up, but they clung to him like a shadow, refusing to let go. He ran his thumb over the edges of the photo, remembering why he had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't just about the restaurant or proving himself. It was for Lily, for her future, her smile, her laughter, her endless hope for the world. She had been his guiding light through all the dark times, and now, as the light seemed to fade, he was struggling to find his way. Gabriel took a deep breath, his heart heavy with indecision. Leaving would mean giving up on everything he had fought for, but staying meant continuing to face the mounting obstacles in his way. As he looked at Lily's picture one more time, he knew he couldn't let her down. Not yet. He had to keep fighting, even if the odds were stacked against him. Gabriel stood by the entrance of the restaurant, watching the door swing open as a few customers trickled in. It wasn't a rush, but it was more than what he had seen in days. These small victories, the result of his marketing ideas, gave him a glimmer of hope. Though the crowd wasn't enough to solve all their problems, it was a sign that things might be starting to shift. As the customers took their seats, Gabriel's mind raced with thoughts of how much more needed to be done. He knew that the restaurant was far from being saved, but this was a step in the right direction. His ideas about offering promotions to local workers and advertising on social media were beginning to show results. The struggle, however, was far from over, and the weight of the situation still loomed over him. In the background, the familiar clatter of dishes and the low murmur of conversations filled the space. Gabriel took a deep breath, trying to hold on to the feeling of progress. He reminded himself that this was what he needed to keep pushing forward. It wasn't just about the restaurant anymore. It was about proving to himself and those around him that he could make things work. Despite the increase in business, there was still a cloud of uncertainty. The restaurant needed more than just a handful of customers to survive, and Gabriel knew it. He glanced toward the back, where Matthew was working, the tension between them still unresolved. If they didn't come together soon, even these small gains wouldn't be enough. Gabriel's renewed hope was fragile, balancing between optimism and the harsh reality that surrounded him. The restaurant was far from being saved, but at least for now, there was a glimmer of something that felt like progress. It wasn't the end of their struggle, but it was a sign that maybe, just maybe, they could turn things around. As the restaurant continued to struggle, an unexpected disaster struck. A problem with their latest marketing promotion backfired. An important client had a bad experience, and word spread quickly. Gabriel's heart sank as he realized the damage this would do. Customers who had started to come back now hesitated, and the few new ones they had attracted disappeared. The fragile hope that had been growing began to unravel. Matthew stormed into the kitchen, his face flushed with frustration. How could this happen? We were just starting to get people back in here. Gabriel stood there, silent, feeling the weight of his own failure. The tension between them, already strained, now seemed unbearable. They had run out of time and ideas. Gabriel clenched his fists, trying to keep his composure. The argument between Matthew and Gabriel grew more intense. Both men were exhausted, their patience stretched thin. Matthew, who had put everything into the restaurant, was on the verge of giving up. "We can't do this anymore, Gabriel. It's over," Matthew said, his voice shaking with anger and defeat. Gabriel refused to accept that this was the end, even though deep down he felt the same fear. He tried to reason with Matthew, but the words felt hollow. The truth was they had no more resources, no more plans, and no more energy to fight. The weight of their failure pressed down on them, heavier than ever. For a moment, the two men stood in silence, both realizing they had reached their breaking point. The restaurant, their shared dream, was slipping away, and they didn't know how to stop it. Gabriel's mind raced for a solution, but the only thing he felt was overwhelming despair. Gabriel stood in silence, overwhelmed by the weight of failure, when suddenly a memory flashed in his mind. It was something Lily had said weeks ago, a small comment about how much she loved the idea of family meals at restaurants with games and activities for kids. Gabriel had dismissed it as childish at the time, but now it seemed like a lifeline. Could this innocent suggestion be the key to saving everything? Inspired, Gabriel quickly put together a plan, blending Lily's idea with his own previous efforts. They would transform the restaurant into a family-friendly hub, offering special deals for kids and creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. The promotional campaign launched, focusing on community values and togetherness. The change was immediate. Families began to pour in, drawn by the new approach, and the once quiet restaurant was now buzzing with life. Matthew walked into the restaurant, stunned by the sight of families filling every table, laughter and conversation replacing the silence that had plagued the space for so long. Gabriel stood beside him, both men too overwhelmed to speak. This was their breakthrough moment, the solution they hadn't seen but had needed all along. As the evening progressed, Gabriel found himself standing next to Lily. Together, they watched the restaurant thrive, filled with people enjoying the space Gabriel had worked so hard to rebuild. He smiled, looking down at his daughter with gratitude, knowing that her innocent words had sparked this transformation. The restaurant, once on the brink of collapse, was now flourishing beyond anything they could have imagined. Gabriel and Lily shared a quiet, proud moment as they witnessed the fruits of their efforts. It was the beginning of something new, and hope was no longer a distant dream. It was real, thriving in every corner of their restaurant. Gabriel's life had completely transformed. The restaurant, once on the verge of collapse, was now thriving. Families filled every seat, and the air buzzed with joy and conversation. Gabriel, standing in the center of it all, took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past finally lift off his shoulders. It wasn't just the restaurant that had been saved. It was his life. Matthew approached Gabriel, giving him a firm handshake, his blue eyes reflecting pride and relief. They had done it. Not only had the restaurant been salvaged, but Gabriel had been offered a permanent position as a partner in the business. It was more than he had ever hoped for. Matthew's once weary face now showed hints of optimism, knowing that they had built something special together. Lily ran up to Gabriel, her hazel eyes glowing with excitement. She had been his constant source of hope and joy, her innocent suggestions proving to be more valuable than he could have ever imagined. She threw her arms around him, her wavy light brown hair catching the light as she laughed. Gabriel hugged her tightly, silently thanking the universe for giving him the strength to hold on. Anna joined them, her green eyes sparkling as she stood by Gabriel's side. There was something more between them now, an unspoken connection that had deepened through the trials they had faced together. The warmth of her presence brought a quiet peace to Gabriel's heart. As they exchanged a knowing glance, it was clear that their story was only beginning. Gabriel, Lily, Matthew, and Anna stood together, watching the vibrant life that now flowed through the restaurant. It was a symbol of new beginnings, not just for the business, but for all of them. They had found not only success, but a newfound sense of family and belonging. For the first time in a long time, Gabriel allowed himself to imagine a future filled with hope and love.
This story really moved me. It shows how even the smallest kindness can make a huge difference, especially when times are tough. What part of it touched you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories, and if you want another unforgettable one, click the video on your screen. See you there.